one. Hey, how's everybody doing today? I'm back here with the next episode of Coffee Talk with Brohawk. And I have the distinct pleasure of having is it the Godfather of Talent?
That's right.
The Godfather of talent optimization with me, Matt Poepsel. If we were in the same room, I'd have to kiss the ring, but uh, it's all
Doesn't
good.
doesn't translate on Zoom, Mark. I'm
Doesn't
so thankful
translate
that
too
you had
much
me on
on
the
Zoom.
show.
Hey, thank you very much, Matt. So, Matt, for those who may not know who you are, and the work that you do, can you tell our viewers a little bit about yourself and what have you been up to these days?
Yeah, I work for a company called the Predictive Index. As you mentioned, being the godfather of talent optimization has its privileges. I get the opportunity to work with consultants and with clients all over the world, helping them try to make sure that the people parts of their businesses are performing at their best so that everything works smoothly.
Excellent, excellent. Now, talent optimization is it's kind of a broad term for some people, and I've actually seen people's mind get blown when I say talent optimization. They're like, "Oh, you're recruiting." No, no, not really. That's a part of it, but how would you define talent optimization as a practice?
Yeah, it's really about aligning the business elements with the people elements inside any organization. And what I
Mhm.
find and have found ever since I started my career when I had a military background in the US
Okay.
Marine Corps, and I found as an example that we invested heavily in leadership. And
Hmm.
it was something that I had just thought, well, this is my first adult job. I guess this is how adults approach their work. They study leadership all day, right? It turned out that wasn't the case. But you think about an organization like that, and they've got to get the technical bits right. You got a lot of logistics, a lot of all kinds of stuff, but you also have to get the people part right too. And
Yep.
they just do a really nice job of that. What I found when I entered the civilian world and the corporate world was that a lot of times we talk about these things as if they're separate. We talk about
Mhm.
the technical aspects, the operational bits of a business, or we go off into a classroom environment. We talk about the people part, maybe, but rarely do we talk about the two as tightly integrated as they actually are. So, talent
Yeah.
optimization changes that. And it was a discipline that we created in 2018, actually. So, it's been just over 5 years. And was really all about saying, okay, it's great that we want to do the people parts better. What does
Hmm.
that really mean? And that was kind of the beginning of that discipline.
Excellent. I love the fact that you refer to as a discipline or a practice, um, because it's something that as a leader you're always trying and striving to improve upon. Um, would you agree with that or
100%. Yeah, I
yeah?
think there's a way to do it. I think what happens a lot of times is we think about the people parts of a business and it's really kind of abstract, a little amorphous. People are complex, and you see this tendency for some people who just natural born leaders can kind of get it done, but others, us mere mortals, we don't know what to do about it. And I think when we approach it as a discipline, it basically describes there's a way to do this, and there is,
Mhm.
and there are specific techniques and ways that we can approach this, and it's really reassuring to people to say, wait a minute, so I don't have to just like deal with chance. I don't just have to hope for the best. It's like, no, there are
Yeah.
specific things we can do, but it does require us to study, to use data, to use our rational minds to kind of figure out what's the best choice I can make as a leader in this situation. That's what disciplines do.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. So, in your experience, can you give a little bit more detail around what talent optimization looks like in practice?
Yeah, 100%. The question I get asked most often is, okay, talent optimization. I know what talent is, and I kind of know what optimization is. What does it really mean? And what is it that we're trying to optimize? And I always say it is about how do we optimize the performance, the engagement, and the well being of our people. Those three things are really important. So when you think about performance, obviously, if we don't have individuals who are able to do the job, either individually or as a team, the business
Hmm.
is going to suffer. That much
Yeah.
we know. But
Hmm.
engagement over the last decade or so has really come on strong as saying if our employees aren't engaged, they're going to leave. They
Yeah.
have choices in this job market, especially the highly skilled ones, especially some of the more portable Gen Z, the most recent generation to enter the workforce. They just won't put up with bad bosses and bad organizations and bad actors. They're going to move on
Yep.
in a way that it didn't happen with earlier generations. And well-being is a massive topic these days where people have really been through a lot since the pandemic and really are still struggling with stress and workloads. So when you think about the more specifics is if there's any individual or any strained relationship in the organization or any team that's not fully optimal, then by definition, the organization's not optimal. So how do we start to evoke the right kinds of practices to try and get as close to that idealized state as we can?
There was something that was posted on LinkedIn. I think I can't remember if you shared it or if you posted it, uh, talking about every or. And I hope I'm saying this correctly. Every business problem is a people problem.
Yeah, 100%.
You
Yeah,
know.
it's definitely one of my favorite sayings because it really kind of puts a face on the fact that a lot of times we look at business and we'll look at metrics that are off, or we'll look at a project that's behind, and we'll sort of take a depersonal look at it and say, like, why is this
Hmm.
happening? And let's look at the funnels and the numbers and all these things, but not recognizing or stopping to recognize the fact that it is about people working together. Do we put the right person in the right role? Do we coach and develop them to be able to perform at the level that we need them to? How do we
Hmm.
manage the interactions with others? And, I know you see this all the time too, Mark. Like, what are some of the things that you've seen that kind of hold us back in terms of people problems that manifest as business problems?
Yeah, Matt, that's a great question. Because working in the contact center space, oftentimes, you're looking for people that have had certain experiences. All right. But it doesn't get down to really understanding, hey, is this a good job fit for this person? Even though they may have been in a role that seemed like a good role for them, but it just didn't give them the motivation and the satisfaction that they really needed. That's how I see it. And as a result, organizations that I've worked with or been a part of, there's turnover issues, and that just costs an organization a lot of money. Goes back to what you were saying. It's a business problem, but it's rooted in a people issue.
I got one of these fancy phones or computers and all this kind of stuff that we
Uh-huh.
have nowadays. Just went through a big system upgrade last night, right? So now all my
Okay.
devices are reset. If I had to call the contact center for this major fruit-based company,
Uh-huh.
then you'd know that maybe what we find is that the time to resolve a call, for example, has gone up. We're missing the metric. Why?
Mhm.
Well, maybe the documentation that our contact center reps need to be able to dispatch the calls quickly, wasn't fully accurate anymore. So it sounds like,
Mhm.
well, the problem is in the manual. Well, hold on. The manual didn't write itself. People wrote the manual. Or
Yes.
maybe the product teams didn't communicate to the documentation teams to get the contact center manuals updated. Like, it'll still be a people problem at the end of the day. It may look like a technical business kind of
Yes.
a sterile kind of issue at first, but it's
Mhm.
not. Keep digging. You'll find that every business problem, certainly all those that affect the contact center, are people problems, and
Well,
therefore
and
people
and
opportunities. I don't want to just be negative about it.
exactly.
The corollary is also true.
Well, and with that, it's not a people problem from the aspect of pointing a finger at somebody,
Correct.
and placing blame, but it's, did we give this person, or did we give this team the right tools and support it needed to be successful?
Yes.
Um,
And
and
in my
understanding what
fictitious
success looks
example,
like.
you'll find it could be communication breakdowns, could be poor
Yep.
planning. Maybe you have somebody who was really excited about the innovation, kind of shiny
Hmm.
aspects of the new product launch, but just didn't think about the operational reality of what's going to
Yes.
come from that. Like, that's where you start to see these kinds of breakdowns. We all have different strengths and potential exposure points as leaders,
Hmm.
as workers inside of an organization. So talent optimization is simply about how do we make sure that we understand who's doing the work, what's the work to be done, and who's leading the charge. And when we start to find fits and gaps, then we can make better decisions about how to move toward that optimal state so that we can avoid the type of problem we were just talking about in the contact center.
I would say the that a deep-seated root with people issues is not knowing how to communicate effectively with
Definitely.
different types of people. And from a talent optimization, you don't just have to understand it's not just about understanding their personality or making sure that the person is the right person in the room, but how are they going to ingest and also provide information
Yeah.
about Gavin.
Yeah, I agree. You want a Brohawk exclusive? Ready? I've
There
been
you go.
using this term, and I don't think I've ever shared it before, but and I'm sure maybe the idea is already out there. But what I like to say is that effective communication is determined by the receiver, not the sender. So if you
Yes.
think, oh, I communicated this, I put it in a Slack message or I wrote it in some document that nobody wanted to read, like I
Hmm.
communicated. You're like, no, if it didn't make it to the receiver, if they didn't properly
Yes.
internalize it and act upon it or whatever, then you didn't communicate effectively and you got to figure that out.
Yes.
There you go. Exclusive. What do you think?
Yeah, I love it. I love it. We're gonna have to slap that out there everywhere now.
But it's so
Yeah.
true, isn't it? We feel like,
Yes.
oh no, I communicated that. You're like, yeah, you communicated it in your way, the way you would like
Hmm.
to receive information. But you got to remember, and this is one of the first hallmarks of leadership, is it's not about you. It's about them. It's about the
Yes.
mission. And so the point is when you have people on your team who are very different from you in terms of their needs of how they need to be communicated to, then it's
Hmm.
your job to figure out how to get those needs met. And maybe you have somebody who's like really good at detail work as your number two, and you're saying like, I want to make sure that you get the answers from me, but you write up the documentation and communicate with these people the way they need. It doesn't matter. There's a lot of ways to do it, but the
Uh-huh.
point is that you have to make sure that we're meeting other people's needs. And I think you're
Hmm.
exactly right, Mark. Communication is a major challenge when you have some people are remote, some are in the office, some
Hmm.
are younger workers, some are more introverted. Like, oh my gosh, it's complicated. I'm not saying it's not complicated,
Yeah.
but it's poorly done in too many examples.
Well, and having those insights um, when you're in the pre-hire phase, uh, so that you know what you're getting as far as what a person's needs are, uh, can greatly help with the talent optimization aspect once you decide to make the decision to offer that person a role within your org.
You may
Correct?
not find a place at a part of the organization that this is more important or more critical than the contact center
Yeah.
because it's already a hard job. It's a thankless job. I mean, we get it.
Hmm.
It's not a job where people are like, I think I'll spend my whole career here. Like we get that. But the reality is
Yes.
that if you hire the wrong type of person who like I'm out of college, fresh out of college, I don't really know myself that way. I'm just happy to get a job and they take a job where
Hmm.
they're not a great fit. Happens all the
Yep.
time, and we hire them because they were really good at the interview. They were like personable
Uh-huh.
and stuff. And we put them in the contact center and they flame out. That happens so often. And, it's just an example of where we didn't take an optimal approach to the hiring, the selection, the onboarding, the assimilation into a team, like all that good stuff.
Yeah, I love that. So, and we may have touched on the science around talent optimization, but what does a science really say about talent optimization?
Yeah, I think one of my favorite things about talent optimization is that it
Mhm.
does take an evidence-based or a scientific approach. Along the way, as I left my military service and I went into corporate, I started to recognize that I wanted to really up my game when it came to learning about the people dynamics in organizations. So I ended up getting my PhD in psychology and studying at this level organizational
Mhm.
science, if you will. So I have a real appreciation for it. Having said that, we always talk about it being an applied science. We don't need egghead projects and navel gazing and all this stuff. We need science that helps us actually do work better. So I think I really like the pragmatic kind of blue collar approach to science that talent optimization espouses. And it basically says we have data about the work we need done. We have data about the people who are doing the work and even the people leading the charge. So we have data. If we ignore it or we don't use this readily available data, like you would
Mhm.
never put up with that in any other part of your business. Can you imagine running a contact center and being like, hey, can you show me your metrics? You're like, oh, we don't have any. Yeah, we don't really measure anything around here. You're like, no, that would never happen. So then you're like,
No.
okay, show me your people data. And they're like, oh, what? Oh, I'm sorry, what? Like, it's like, no, hold on a second. Why would
Hmm.
we forego real science and real information
Yep.
about people fitting to jobs or teams or all this kind of stuff? That's kind of how I look at it, is that it's not as much of a mystery as we make it out sometimes, but we have
Hmm.
to be willing to collect and utilize the data that we can get our hands on.
And the data can't be anecdotal data. Well, I think this person, or
Yeah.
I feel like, or in this situation, it's got to be backed up by true data.
100%. And that's kind of the
Yeah.
claim to fame for the predictive index, of course, is having
Mhm.
behavioral data, cognitive ability data, as well
Mhm.
as employee engagement data. There's lots of data that comes out of PI, but
Yep.
then there's also other important data, for example, like what are your values? Like when you're a
Mhm.
worker, what are your values? How do you show up at work? Like what's really important and meaningful to you? Like this is a form of data as well. And then,
Yes.
when you start talking about the metrics of doing the job, that throws off more data, more data.
Hmm.
And, in a high analytics world that we're in now, being able to crunch all that data and draw novel insights and action plans out of it, that really is the bedrock of where talent optimization, gets its strength.
I love it. I love it. Um, have you seen or worked with organizations, obviously not naming names, but have you seen where talent optimization initiatives have fallen flat? And what was the root cause of those? But also, on the opposite side of that, where they've succeeded and what were the root causes that you saw of success?
Yeah, I think that one of the examples when we think about people practices, a lot of times, if in a weaker organization, you can get the executive team or the CEO or the owner specifically to care about the people part long enough to invest in it, a lot of times they enter into that with a mindset that says, fine, you can take the people to training, but I want them back on the floor right away. And so
Yep.
you look at talent optimization if it were an event. Okay, we'll do
Hmm.
half a day in the classroom, and then all of a sudden we're done, right? We can move on.
Yes.
Like there's nothing else that works that way. You don't just say, you know what, I need to get in shape. I'm going to go to the gym for this afternoon and be done with it and I move on with the rest of my year. Like, no, it doesn't. I'm sorry, but it doesn't work that way. So I think that's one of the very first ones is don't look at optimization as an event. Look at it as an ongoing process, something that gets easier, just like working out. Once you develop the
Yep.
habits and the muscles, it does get easier and you can sort of specialize in things. But that's definitely what I see in some of the weaker organizations. The other is something that's I see that's probably the most rampant, which is
Hmm.
that in a highly technology driven, rational Western society that we're in, we train our leaders like in these MBA programs and executive education programs, like what I went through at Harvard Business School. It's always comes down to the technology, the operations, the process. Like these things are going to take our businesses to the next level without the people part. It's like
Yes.
we just don't spend enough. It's not even anywhere near 50-50. Maybe it's like 95-5, 95 technical. And we just obsess over the next, you know, widget that's going to help us or the next technique or a model or framework or flywheel or whatever that's going to
Mhm.
help us get to the next level as if people weren't really what's driving the business. So I think
Yes.
that's another area is that over indexing or leaning too heavily on the technical parts of the business, the mechanics of a business, as opposed to the people fabric that really drives a business. Those would probably be two of the ones I'd put right at the top of what holds companies back, not treating it as an ongoing process and not bringing enough emphasis on the people aspects and saying, oh, that's HR's job. No, 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 no. It's not HR's job.
It's funny. You talk about the technology, and I always call those the purple squirrel moments. You
Yep.
know, it's like, oh, okay, well, this brand new technology is gonna, do amazing things, help us julienne fries, slice bread a different way, et cetera, et cetera. I'm dating myself there, but that's okay. And it's amazing that within just a couple of years, organizations like, well, yeah, this didn't really do it for us. Um, or they're an organization, and I love your example about the event. And all of a sudden, when everybody was working out of an office, you'd see all these murals or pictures or slogans going up on the walls, and that was supposed to be culture and engagement. Um, but I think those organizations were really missing the boat on what engagement actually was and what talent optimization truly is. You know.
Yeah, and that's not to take away from training events or to say
Mhm.
that technology and processes shouldn't evolve. They absolutely should,
Exactly.
but it's just that they're not a substitute for a long-term commitment to getting the people part right. And
Hmm.
everything around us is swirling and constantly changing, from the macro economy to the competitive landscape to the technology landscape, et cetera. So why would we think that we can just be done with sort of an approach to people, or we did that training back in January, so now we're good, right? It's like
Yes.
everything's constantly swirling. You've got to stay on top of this all the time.
And it goes back to how people are ingesting information that's communicated to them. Effective communication is based, as you said, based on the receiver, not the communicator.
And I think it
So,
also comes down to the perception of other people in the sense
yeah.
that, like, if I have customers and I'm like, wow, look at this new chat bot technology. I can put this little
Hmm.
widget at the bottom right of my website, and then all of a sudden I can protect the call center with all this automation. Maybe, but what's the user experience like? Or when they do call in, are they that much more frustrated than they would have been otherwise? These are complex things to deal with, but I do believe that we will continue to see more technology enter the workplace, and that's a good thing overall. But if we believe that it's going to solve all of our problems, or that people won't continue to be the driving force around competitive differentiation, then we've missed it, you know?
At the end of the day, with contact center work, in any type of customer facing environment, if you don't have a sense, or at least a portion of your business that's dedicated to, white glove or concierge, or meeting the customers where they want to be. Not everybody wants self service, although it is something that's pretty important for a lot of people. Um, but again, if you're not going back and taking care of the people aspect, um, of the business, I mean, you're missing the mark. So,
So then take this back also to, what about a manager who manages his or her people, their people, the way that they want it to be managed? Like, well,
yep.
maybe that's okay, but it's really, again, it's not about you. It's about their needs and meeting their needs in as elegant a way as possible. It's good
Mhm.
advice for our end user customers who are calling into the contact center. It's good advice for our managers who are managing people in the contact center. It's just good advice.
Yes. It's funny. You don't get you don't see this question out there as much anymore, for leaders that are or managers that are being hired. What's your management style? You know,
Right.
um,
It's a good
because
one.
yeah, I mean, people don't care what your management style, is. They care about how you're going to treat people that you have responsibility for.
Hmm.
And it was funny. One of the past positions, that I interviewed for, and Matt, I think I may have shared this with you. I may have shared this on another episode as well. But one of the questions I asked at the very end of the conversation was, to the people I would ultimately report to, is, are you looking for a manager or a leader?
Mm.
And um, they said, oh, that's a great question. I'm like, well, I thought it kind of was, but you know,
Yeah, I said,
um,
I suspected.
and so they thought about it, and I got a message from the the person that was going to be my boss, or it was ultimately my boss, over the weekend after the interview, and the response was, uh, "We want a leader for this position." Great,
Mm.
you
Bang.
know. So it goes both ways, and it's okay for candidates to ask those types of questions, as well, just to make sure what the expectation is from the people that they're going to be reporting to, um, during that
Definitely.
process.
Well, it's a
Because
long-term relationship, ideally, even if
yeah,
long-term in this day and age only means a couple of years, that's still a long time. That's a big chunk of your, psychic
exactly.
energy in your life that you're going to be dedicating to this company if it all works out the way you both hope it does. So yeah, I'm a big
Mhm.
advocate of candidates saying, like, what are we both signing up for here?
Yeah.
Right. So your question, if they come back and they're like, yeah, we're really just looking for a manager, we really don't want to hear your ideas. We don't really care if you take good care of your people. We just want you to
Exactly.
manage and press buttons and stuff. You're like, okay, I'm glad you said so. Thanks very much.
Yeah,
I'm not the person for this job.
exactly.
Yeah. It's all
Exactly.
about
And
fit. It's all about fit.
yeah, yes. And knowing that, with like a tool like predictive index, you get those insights,
Mm.
before that person even walks in the door. And I think that's so invaluable for an organization these days.
There's another
You know,
thing that's really important is that sometimes you end up hiring somebody to do a set of work that's also very different from what you would want to do. So, for example,
yep.
on my teams, whenever there's high detail work to be done, I know that I
Hmm.
can't do it. At my
Hmm.
advanced age, Mark, there's just no old dog, new tricks. You can call it what you want. I just can't. I'm just not going to ever have that as a muscle for me. But I have gotten old enough to have the wisdom to surround myself with people who are good at those things. But what
Hmm.
that means is that if I bring somebody onto my team who's good at detail work, because I've got detail work I need done, I
Yep.
have to pre negotiate those differences with that person. So I remember having a conversation with a woman that was on my team, and I was
Yep.
making her absolutely bonkers because I would just walk up to a whiteboard and I would scribble all this stuff and just
Mhm.
bark out orders and stuff because I was just excited. And
Yeah.
she's like, "You have got to write something down. Like I need the clarity." So we negotiated out of saying, "Hey, you know what? What does it look like for me to give you a reasonable amount of detail so that you can have the scaffolding to know you're doing a good job because that's important to
Mhm.
you and therefore it's important to me. And I have to change
Yes.
my natural tendency to at least meet you halfway. I mean, I'm not going
Mhm.
to give you US tax code equivalents of operating orders, but I can do better. Yeah, I could do better. And
Yes.
that type of pre-negotiation ideally is when it happens before you start working together. In that case
Mhm.
that I just gave the example, it happened while we were in mid-flight, which is a little bit more sketchy, but
Yeah.
it can still work. So I think the point isn't that you're only going to hire people that are just like you. That's going to be a
Mhm.
recipe for disaster. But
Yep.
recognizing that having the awareness ahead of time because you've got the data, you understand the job, the person in the job, you know the similarities and differences. You can cover
Mhm.
off on any gaps or any similarities that might lead to overused strengths. Like those are all things you get to do if you take an optimized approach. The opposite of that is we just do whatever we feel all the time. We crash into each other like bumper cars. The job doesn't get done. People get frustrated and they leave. Like the choice is yours, right?
Yes. Yes. Or worse, the folks in an executive's uh, seat sees that, hey, these guys are playing bumper cars with each other and they're just not getting along, and we need to make a decision. And that's the worst thing that can happen
The
is
last thing you
somebody's
want.
making a decision about you.
Yeah, right. And it happens all the time. And
Yep.
it's the other thing I hear a lot is for young leaders who say, "Yeah, what does it take to get noticed? Like I'd like to get
Uh-huh.
promoted someday." And they're wondering like how in this system do I get
Hmm.
recognized as being a competent and successful leader? And
Hmm.
these are real challenges that people have.
Yeah.
And I think that again, this optimal approach and following this discipline and studying your craft, like these things eventually they do shake themselves out. You don't want somebody else making decisions, like you said, about your team. Like it's the last thing you
Yep.
want, but you do have to study. You have to use the data. You have to practice and skin your knees a little
Yes.
bit and get better. Like if you're not willing to do those things, you're not going to stay relevant.
It's funny. I was having a conversation with my 5.5-year-old the other day. I was taking her to school. She's like, I know everything. I'm like, well, you must be like the most amazing little kid ever because I can tell you, at my advanced age, I'm still learning something new every day. She's like, really? I'm like, yeah, you came home yesterday and you taught me what 5 plus 5 was. And I didn't know that. And she's like, you didn't know that? I'm like, no, you see, you taught me something new. So you always have to be learning. And I think if you have that lifelong learner mentality, um, you can impart that same mentality on others as well. You know.
Well, definitely. And this is the problem that we're learning today is that, 5.5, she's got a long time before she'll be in the workforce, maybe
Yeah,
not as long as it seems. But,
exactly.
I think what's happening now is we're starting to see multi-generational issues crop up on both
Yep.
ends. You're
Hmm.
starting to see boomers and Gen Xers like myself who are starting to, normally we would age out of the workforce, but the reality is
Hmm.
now because life expectancies are longer and the nature of demographics, we're staying in on our terms.
Yep.
And it's like, whoa, that's weird. And then and new, and then Gen Z is coming up. Obviously the newest generation in the workforce for now, and it really is bringing a very different set of expectations and needs into work. So
Yep.
imagine, not even 10 or 12 years from now, like when your daughter's generation enters the workforce, oh my gosh, like to have had nothing but access to the world's information on a device for as long as you can remember, to be a hyper connected
Yes.
in that way, it's going to be incredible, how that's going to be changing. And the point I was going to make is that today, your organizational leaders tend to be boomers and Gen X people, maybe millennials, elder millennials too, on average,
Yep.
thinking and having grown up in a very different experience at work than the expectations and needs of those who are just entering. And contact centers tend to run a little younger based on the nature of the work.
Yep.
And so they're bringing, you have an outweighted percentage of people who have these new needs, but you're still part of an organization that's run by people who are many, many years removed from that. These are like, it's like a hot front and a cold front of clouds coming together and just thunder and lightning, right? That's what it feels like. It
Uh,
happens all the time.
It's a great analogy. I don't know if you remember seeing these Beloit College
Oh,
lists that they used to put out, and Marist College now produces these. But it was a list of for college graduates that graduated in a certain year and what their frame of reference of the world is.
mm,
Um, so like my older kids were born, mid to late 90s. Um, they never knew a world that didn't have the internet. Uh,
right.
you um, uh, they didn't realize Pete Rose was as great a ball player as he was, you know, as an example.
Yeah,
So you also have to take in the lens um, that people see the world through, um, as a
true.
leader as well. Yeah, just kind of interesting stuff. Anybody ever wants to take a look at that, just Google Beloit College mindset list or something like that.
Mark, I've
Uh,
started to do research into 2030 because I'm understanding and trying to look at the future of work. And by 2030, 11% of the workforce will be Generation Alpha. They're
oh
not
my
even in the
gosh.
workforce yet. And you're like, it's not that far away. It sounds like it's far, far away, but considering how much trouble we're already having assimilating Gen Z, it's not that far
Hmm.
away. So
No.
we won't dwell on that, but it's constantly changing. This is why, again,
Yep.
it's not an event, and even if you get to this idealized state of optimization, don't expect to stay there without a lot of effort. You got to keep working at this stuff.
And the root of it goes back to how are you communicating? Uh, and communication is so critical, and
Definitely.
understanding how each person is receiving information coming in, but also the lens that they're seeing information coming to them at
And I think
is
you got
so
to pay
important.
attention because what happened,
Yeah.
like I had a Gen Z person on my team one time, this is going back a little bit, and had said to me that because the attention spans are shorter, just based
Uh-huh.
on technology, TikTok, YouTube, everything,
Yep.
had said to me something I had not appreciated and said, 45-minute meetings are a challenge for me to maintain my attention. I prefer 30-minute meetings. And I thought, oh my,
Mm,
wow, how interesting. Because a lot of times you want to
yes.
have a brainstorm, you schedule an hour-long meeting or 50-minute meeting
Yeah.
or whatever. And thinking that there's some people who, that's just not how they operated going all the way through college. The
Hmm.
same young man said to me, well, I bought a lot of books. My parents bought a lot of books when I was an undergrad, but I never used them. I just would YouTube. I just Google everything. I thought, well, they must be pretty happy to hear that. But it's just to your point about the mindset. You got to
Yeah.
it's not about you as a leader. You got to get into the mindset of the people who you're
Yes.
pursuing the task with, right? So
I I love it. I love it. And
mhm.
speaking of that, we've been going about 30 minutes or so, and I know that people's attention span may be getting short with. I mean, even though I could talk for hours with you about this stuff, Matt. And but I just want to be respectful of everybody else's time that may be viewing this. So we've gotten to the point of our conversation. I call it the speed round.
Ooh,
You ready for this?
I'm ready. Charlie
Okay.
Hustle. If Charlie Hustle could do it,
Excellent.
I can do it.
There you go. Yeah,
There's
another
your
Pete
Pete
Rose
Rose reference right
reference.
there. It's all full circle.
I love it. So I'm interested in how would you respond to this? At this point in my career, um, I wish I could go back in time and tell my younger self this. And how would that have helped you navigate your career differently?
Yeah, I had that classic imposter syndrome. Like from the time
Uh-huh.
that I can remember, I've always been an insecure overachiever. And I would
Mhm.
say that if I could have told myself that the things that I thought mattered, didn't matter as much as they seemed, and to have practiced a little bit of self-compassion, I could have saved myself a lot of heartache. So that's probably something that I wouldn't say I regret how it's turned out, but that's certainly something that would help me back in the day.
There you go. That's awesome. I think it's a great one. So what fact about Matt would people be surprised to learn about you?
If you didn't know me, you might be surprised to know that I'm a committed meditator. I meditate every day. I have for a long time, a couple years now. I shouldn't say a long time, a couple years
Okay.
now, and I really enjoy it as for a lot of different reasons. But it became part of my daily morning routine. After a
Okay.
little bit of reading philosophical texts, especially Eastern Asian texts,
Uh-huh.
um, Tibetan Buddhism, and specifically, I've got a nice
Okay.
meditation practice going that I'm enjoying quite a bit.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Um, so after a stressful day, you may have already started touching on this, but what's your go-to tactic for unwinding?
Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy.
Oh, I
Never
like it.
miss them.
I
It's,
like it.
it's ridiculous, but it's true.
Oh my.
So I don't know exactly how long it's been. And I wouldn't say I sit there and I watch like obsessively, but it's just reassuring to me to have it on and that my day is
Uh-huh.
wound down by the time locally it's probably like 7 p.m. and I've kind of
Yeah.
had dinner, settled in, and I might be doing some light non-taxing brain work while it's on. But
Uh-huh.
the consistency of Pat and Vanna, man, it's good for what ails you.
And you just never know what's going to come out of people's mouths, you know?
You know, but I am better at Wheel of Fortune than Jeopardy for those keeping score at
Excellent.
home.
Excellent. I love it. So, Matt, this has been a great conversation. I know that there's people that are probably watching this and are like, man, I wish I could pick Matt's brain a little bit. So, are there conferences or events or are there things that you're going to be attending? Or if someone just wants to reach out to you and about the topic of talent optimization or want to reach out to me, I can do an introduction, but how would what's the best way of reaching out to you to connect with you? Um,
Yeah, I'll answer
Sorry,
your
my brain.
maybe it was the second question first about where you can find me. Is every month, second Wednesday of every month, I host a show called Perspectives that's
Okay.
powered by the Predictive Index. It's a webinar series. We always have a nice panel. We're going through different topics. So if you're ever interested in checking out a monthly installment where we run through a variety of different business topics, that's a good place to go and just kind of get a little bit more of the irreverent, but hopefully helpful type of advice you've heard today. But then absolutely, I'd welcome reaching out to me. I live on LinkedIn.
Yep.
I'm super easy to find on LinkedIn. And if you search Godfather of Talent Optimization, I'm sure it probably shows up. But yeah, that's the best place to connect with me. And I would love to hear from you.
Excellent. Matt, this has been a great conversation. As someone that's in the index ecosystem as a certified partner myself, I mean, it's very humbling to have you on this episode of Coffee Talk with Brohawk, and I really appreciate you taking time out of your schedule. And once again, anybody that's watching this, you want some more information about PI, you want. I mean, I'll even throw in a free assessment for somebody behavioral assessment if you're interested in learning more about the science behind it and you want to take it for a test drive. So look forward to Matt more and more conversations going forward, and I'll definitely be as the first Tuesday of every month.
Second Wednesday of
First
every month. Yep,
second Wednesday of every month.
absolutely.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I look forward to it. And Matt, once again, thank you very much for your time today. We
Thank you,
appreciate it.
Mark. Really appreciate you having me on.
All right. Have a great rest of the day.